Hello, I'm Gray Snake, and this is NewElderScrolls.com podcast on Skyrim. This is my friend Genome here. Say hello.
Hello.
He's a fellow Elder Scrolls enthusiast, and today we're going to be discussing our thoughts on the topic of everything Skyrim, really. So let's get this thing going. First topic here is Bethesda is really good about getting you jacked up about their games, and Skyrim is really no different than that. As of right now, there's only 2 official trailers out. What are your thoughts on these, and what did you first think when you saw them?
Well, I mean, the first trailer, it didn't really give much away. It basically told you that there was a new Elder Scrolls coming out, and there was dragons. And I was really pumped because the new Elder Scrolls has been my dream for a long time. And then the second trailer came out, gave you a lot more information. You got a lot of scenes of gameplay. The graphics have been updated a lot. You got to see, how the fighting has changed, how the areas have changed, and basically what's been improved.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that the biggest thing when they really relaunched the first trailer is just to get that initial hype going. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that there was not any information really other than, hey, there's another new Elder Scrolls coming out. But I was just as jacked up as you were on that. The second one was really well put together. I mean, it gives you a really good taste, and it really has that same feel as like the original Oblivion trailer did. It really got you jacked up about that. But moving on to our next topic, they have Bethesda dropped their previous game engine. I believe it was the Gamebryo engine, and they created a new one called the Creator engine, and basically built Skyrim from the ground up on this, as opposed to where Oblivion, where they had something that was already built and they just kind of went from there. Do you think the new change in engine is going to really change the feel of Skyrim as compared to Oblivion in a serious way, or what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, from what you can see from the trailer and the gameplay, I mean, yeah, the graphics look, they look a lot updated, but the main feel of the area and the game itself doesn't look like it's changed too much. And when Oblivion came out, and same with Morrowind, the graphics were great for their time, and I hope they're doing the same thing with Skyrim. And like I said, I think it'll still have the same feel, even though the engine has been changed. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really change in engine. They're really trying to tailor this to make Skyrim an ultimate experience. I mean, the new locale in Skyrim is supposed to be fundamentally different than Cyrodiil, which is an entirely different part of the continent. So I mean, I really agree that changing this is going to change for the better, but it just really depends on what they're doing with the system itself, other than as compared to what Oblivion. I mean, Oblivion, like I said, was very impressive. I mean, that's really the first game where I first remember when you look out in the distance and you see a tree up on the mountains, and where you can actually walk to that tree, and that was one of the most impressive things about Oblivion, is that you could see where you wanted to go and actually go there. But with the new engine, I'm sure that the beautiful landscapes that Skyrim's screenshots have already depicted are going to be even better than Oblivion's in my opinion, anyways. Here's another one. What are some of the elements of Oblivion's gameplay that you really thought should have been addressed or should be addressed in Skyrim's gameplay?
Well, I mean, Oblivion, the main improvement from Oblivion from Morrowind was the fighting, obviously, because in Morrowind, you could swing at something for half an hour and maybe hit it 3 times. Mm-hmm. And in Oblivion, they really improved the fighting a lot, and they improved the graphics. But the fighting really changed in the way that when you hit something, you hit it. You didn't mysteriously, do no damage. But
right, yeah, if you're at close quarters, when you're actually swinging in that range, you're gonna hit it. I mean, depending on damage, but you are actually gonna make contact, which is the important part.
But it was still pretty standard in Oblivion. I mean, there were different moves you could do. With Blade, you could do the sidestep and disarm people, and you could knock people down with the hand-to-hand. But from what we've seen in the Skyrim trailer, is there'll be a lot more detailed fighting, and there'll be cinematic kills, which will really help to immerse you in the gameplay. And
the thing about it is that the more cinematic a gameplay experience, the more immersive it's going to be. And ultimately that's the kind of gamer I am. Is when I think of Elder Scrolls, I think of grand epic adventures, and anything that happens that pulls you out of that adventure really decreases your enjoyment of the game. And while Oblivion at the time, it was phenomenal. As you know, the time has gone on, it has aged to that point where you're like, okay, you know, once you kill someone, they just kind of ragdoll away from you, you know.
Yeah.
And if they get hit hard enough, they just kind of ragdoll into the air and, you know, flip down, you know, a mountain or something like that, which is, you know, like I said, which is cool. You know, it's realistic in that sense that, you know, they're flying away from you, but ultimately it doesn't really have that type of realistic effect to it as you would, you know, catch in real life. What do you think about Skyrim's screenshots? They have so much detail, and the new engine boasts really realistic environments, and even the precipitation. They were talking about how, you know, snow is actually going to fall realistically instead of just having one type of standard snow effect where there's already snow in the environment and it just happens to be snowing where you're, you know, in where you're standing. That's something that I think is changing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the main problems with Oblivion and the graphics is, I mean, when you were in the Oblivion Gates or fire or anything, snow, rain, if you looked close enough, if you really looked at it, it was just one image playing on your screen and it would move with you no matter where you go. And I think adding a lot more detail to the game, you know, rain coming down, things actually getting wet. I imagine, you know, if you want to go for a swim, your clothes will get wet, and it's just one more thing that'll really help you feel like you're in the game. And I think a lot more detail like that will really add to the
overall experience.
Experience.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I know in Oblivion, the third-person perspective was really ultimately just for aesthetics. I very rarely used it, especially in combat. With the new and improved third-person view of Skyrim, really, what are your thoughts on that? You think you might play more in a third-person? Because there have been, you know, I mean, you look at Bethesda's game Fallout. That's really a game that used third-person very well through the use of VATS and whatever, but... what do you think of that in Skyrim's version of third person? They're saying new and improved, but that's really all we've gotten so far.
I think improving the third person fighting would be a great idea, because, I mean, then you could still play the game first person, but if you want to go ahead and play it third person, I mean, it's really your choice. And like you said, in Oblivion, you could play third person, but it wasn't really effective in fighting. I mean, sure, when you're traveling, you'd go on third person just for like purely aesthetics, but overall it wasn't very useful. And I think improving the fighting and third person capabilities in Skyrim will really be a good
make
choice.
For a more cinematic experience. Yeah. As we've already touched on the new improved combat system with that, I mean, it's just that thing of whether or not it's going to be, you know, it's either going to make or break, you know, the combat system in the game, obviously in third person, but the first person's always still going to be there. And in my opinion, Oblivion, Morrowind, the game is really meant to be played in first person. I mean, that's really the type of style that's really works for me anyways, but there might be people out there who want third person ability, you know.
I mean, I totally agree. I would prefer first person myself, you know, watching your sword go, you can see your shield coming up, but once again, there's been plenty of, you know, great fighting games that are in third person, and
yep.
if you can have them both in one game, I mean, that's just all the better.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Alright, another topic I want to get into is the new Radiant story system that I know you don't know a lot about, but basically it's going to log everything that you do to some effect and then change the story accordingly based on what you're doing. In my experience, this is probably going to make the whole overall storytelling a lot more unique and exciting. I mean, really, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea. It's just one more of those things that are going to make the game a lot more personal. I mean, in Morrowind, there weren't very many decisions you can make. In Oblivion, there were a couple. You know, you'd get a quest, and there'd be two different outcomes, but it wouldn't really change the universe around you or anything that happened. And in the new Radiant story system, it can affect your character. It can also affect how different people in the town react to you. And like I said, different outcomes, hopefully they will change the universe around you so that you'll actually have motives for making different choice instead of just, you know, picking whichever one suits you best.
Picking, like, what quest should I do now?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as that. I mean, like I said, as far as playthroughs on Oblivion, I love Oblivion. I played through it so many times, and
I still play it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for it because, you know me, I mean, I'm the kind of person who really likes to play through a game and then have the next time I play through it where I can make the experience completely different than before. And in Oblivion, you could do that to a degree by, changing up. Like, if you went a warrior the first time, you could go and play as a mage the second time, but that's just real, ultimately gameplay, not storyline affected,
Exactly.
And that's really what I'm excited for, is that the new Radiant storyline is really going to take that into effect and help out with, creating a unique and new experience each time you play through the game. Let's see, what do we got here? Let's talk about the new combat system. That's going to be a huge improvement. I mean, we already touched on it a bit, but not only that, but the way that the combat system is going to really affect actual styles of gameplay. Like, for instance, what I mean by that is in one hand you can have a spell, and in the other you can actually have a mace. Or maybe you can, have two of the same spells, and it's actually going to amplify the effect. What are your thoughts on that at all?
I think improving the combat system is going to be mainly the highlight of the game. I mean, the combat system in Morrowind, like we said earlier, was,
Flawed
in all honesty, complete crap. I mean, it sucked. And in Oblivion, it wasn't bad, but there could have been a lot of improvements, and these improvements are being made in Skyrim, and I really think that's what's going to make this a great, groundbreaking game, is it's going to have, all the ups and downs of an RPG. It's going to have all the great, storytelling and leveling and, creating your character, but it's also going to have that fun excitement of, you're going to have a great new combat system. Like I said earlier, you're going to have the cinematic kills. It's going to make it a lot more exciting and a lot more addicting, too, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, God, no matter which way you look at it, really the combat system is really going to be the foundation for what, that's what you're really going to be doing throughout most of the game.
Exactly. I mean, that's the base roots of the game, is the fighting, I guess.
And, each iteration of the Elder Scrolls has been groundbreaking for its time. I mean, I remember when Morrowind came out, I played that game so much, but I was just a little kid. I couldn't really fully appreciate, the actual, greatness of the game. But then, when Oblivion came out, I remember exactly where it was, and it was phenomenal. I mean, at that point in time, it was, it got so many Game of the Year recommendations. It won so many awards.
It was groundbreaking for its time, and it's still a very decent game even today.
It's just like we just said. I play through that every now and then. I'll pick it up, and you'll pick it up, and it's each time you play. There are still things about Oblivion that I go through that I never saw before.
Exactly. Just recently I just discovered something, the Frostfire Glades, and that's the great thing about the game, is that it's so vast that you're always discovering new things, and that's the kind of thing that creates replay value. There's always new things to discover in the game, and that'll even give you incentive to keep going. That's a way to keep you interested in the game, and to not get bored with it. And
yeah, like I said, I agree wholeheartedly with you on that one. One thing that I really do want to touch on is that in this game particularly, the storyline of Morrowind really has a similar starts on that, but really the ultimate thing is that you start out as a prisoner, and you go on. I think everything except for Morrowind. I think Morrowind, you're
a prisoner in Morrowind too. Yeah.
It's Daggerfall where your ship crashes, isn't that? Daggerfall I think is where your ship crashes and you're actually a friend of the Emperor, you accept him. But the storylines are pretty similar in that they start out, except for Daggerfall, in that they start out, as you're a prisoner, and from what I've heard, this one you're being dragged to your death, and something happens where you stop. And in Morrowind, you start out, you get off the ship, you choose your race, you talk to the guy inside the Satanin receiving house, I don't know what it's called, but you talk to that dude, and he can either ask you the questions and generate your class for you. You can pick a class. In Oblivion, I really like the way they did, where they force you through that kind of opening where you're in the prison and you go with the Emperor until his death. I really like that. But like I said, this one, it's kind of taken that different route a little bit, in that you don't actually start out, and you are what you play, and that's really the element that really is paramount for the gameplay, is that if you use a lot of magic spells, you're going to become better at those magic schools. If you use a lot of maces, or if you use a lot of swords, those respectively will get better, and that's one thing that I really like, is that they've changed that. What are your thoughts?